Understanding procedural programming concepts in C. C is a type of programming language, and it belongs to a group of languages called procedural languages. This means that C programs are made up of small building blocks called procedures, which are like mini programs that perform specific tasks. Think of it like building a big Lego creation out of lots of small Lego pieces. Each piece does a specific job, and you put them all together to make something bigger and more complex. That's kind of like how procedures work in a C program. C is a type of computer language that uses procedures. Other types of programming languages might use different ways of organizing code, like classes or interfaces, but C uses procedures as the main building blocks. Procedures are like small, specific tasks that the computer can do. A C program is made up of lots of these procedures working together. It might seem different from other programming languages you've seen, but it's just a different way of organizing things. In C, we use procedures to create programs. A procedure is a set of instructions that perform a specific task. It's kind of like a recipe for cooking, where you have a set of steps to follow to make a dish. In programming, we have a set of steps to follow to make a program. You might be used to using object-oriented programming languages, which use things like classes, properties, and interfaces to create programs. C doesn't use those things. Instead, we just use procedures. Sometimes people might call these procedures functions, methods, or routines. But it doesn't matter what they're called. What matters is that they're the building blocks we use to create programs. Procedures can take inputs called parameters, or they might not take any inputs at all. They can also return outputs called return values, or they might not return anything. We write procedures and call them as needed until we have a complete program. Let's take a look at an example. I'll open my main C file, and you can see that it currently has an empty main procedure. That's where the program starts running. To make our program do something useful, we need to add more procedures to it. These procedures will perform specific tasks that we want our program to do. For bigger programs, we usually group related procedures together in separate files. This makes our code more organized and easier to manage. We can then call these procedures from our main file when we need to use them. Let's look at an example. In my program, I have an empty main procedure that is the entry point for the program. But for larger programs, it is better to group related procedures together in separate files. Now, let's start writing some code in orders. See, for instance, in this project, I have a file named orders. See, that contains some procedures to help calculate the total cost of an order if I were building a shopping cart app. One of the procedures is called calculate sales tax, and it takes the order subtotal as input. In my project, I have a code file called orders. See, that contains procedures for calculating the sales tax and shipping cost of an order. The calculate sales tax procedure takes the order subtotal as a parameter and returns the tax on that order, which I've set to 5%. I'm using the double data type for the parameter and return value, although doubles aren't the best data type to use for currency. The calculate shipping cost procedure is similar to the first one and calculates the shipping cost of an order based on the weight of the items in the order. In our program, we have a shopping cart and we want to calculate the total cost of an order. We have a file called orders. See, that contains some procedures to help us with this task. The first procedure is called calculate sales tax. It takes the subtotal of the order as input and calculates the tax on it. For our example, we have set the tax rate to be 5%. The procedure returns the calculated tax value. The second procedure is called calculate shipping cost. It also takes the subtotal of the order as input and calculates the shipping cost, which is set to be 10% of the order subtotal. The procedure returns the calculated shipping cost value. The third procedure, calculate order total, takes the subtotal, tax, and shipping cost values as input parameters and calculates the total cost of the order by adding these values together. Finally, the procedure returns the total order cost value. So, these procedures are like small building blocks that we can use to make our program work. We can use them separately or combine them to perform more complex tasks. In C programming language, procedures are an essential part of building programs, and they help us to write code that is organized, easy to read and maintain. Let's say you have a set of instructions for making a sandwich and you want to use those instructions in a recipe book. You need to write down the sandwich instructions on a separate piece of paper and then include that paper in your recipe book so you can use those instructions to make the sandwich. In the same way, when you want to use a procedure from another file in your main file, you need to write down the procedure in a separate header file and include that header file in your main file so you can use the procedure. Now, let's start writing some code in orders. I'm going to make a new file in my project called orders. This file will include a declaration for the calculate order total procedure so that I can call it from the main file. Declarations just include the name of the procedure, the type of data it returns, and the type of data any parameters it expects will be. To be able to use the procedure calculate order total inside main, we need to first declare it in a header file. Let's name it orders. In this header file, we only need to mention the name of the procedure, the return type, and the type of the parameter it expects. The header file is protected by include guards using #ifdef and #define statements, which prevent the header from being included multiple times in the same file. Once we have declared the procedure in the header file, we can include it in the main C file using a directive that makes the procedure declaration available inside the file. And now we can call this procedure inside the main function. For instance, let's say we want to call calculate order total with a subtotal of $100. We can do that like this. This will call the calculate order total function with a subtotal of $100 and store the return value in a variable named total. We can then use print to print the total cost of the order on the console. Now, let's see an example of how we can use these procedures. Let's say we have a program that needs to calculate the total cost of an order. We have 3 procedures in our orders C file, which we want to use in our main program: calculate sales tax, calculate shipping cost, and calculate order total. To use these procedures in our main program, we need to declare them in a header file. We create a new header file named orders and add a declaration for calculate order total procedure, which takes one parameter of type double and returns a double. Then we include the orders header file in our main program to make the declaration of the calculate order total procedure available. Next, we create a variable named subtotal and assign the value of 100 to it. We then create a new variable named total, which will store the calculated order total. We call the calculate order total procedure with subtotal as its parameter and store the result in the total variable. Finally, we output the total to the console using another procedure, and that's it. We now have a complete program that calculates the total cost of an order. Now, let's say I want to print the total cost of the order to the console. I can do this by calling another procedure named printf. This procedure is used to print formatted output to the screen. To print the total cost of the order, I will use printf and give it some instructions on what to print. I will tell it to print grand total, followed by the value of the variable total. But before I can use the printf procedure, I need to include a declaration for it in my code. The declaration for printf is already included in the standard input-output library that comes with C, so I just need to include that library in my code by using a special directive at the beginning of my file. Before we move on, let's recap what we just did. We wrote some code in a separate file which contained 3 procedures: calculate sales tax, calculate shipping cost, and calculate order total. Each procedure had a specific task and returned a value which could be used by other procedures. To use these procedures in another file, we needed to declare them first. We created a new header file called orders and added the declaration for calculate order total. This allowed us to call this procedure from our main program. In the main program, we created a variable to store the order subtotal and another variable to store the total. We then called calculate order total to get the grand total and printed it to the console using the print procedure from the standard input-output library. Even though the program is small, it's made up of many procedure calls working together. This is the power of procedural programming. Let's take a look at how we can compile and run our C code using Visual Studio Code. Even though Visual Studio Code can do this for us automatically, it's good to know how to do it ourselves. The program we've been working on is made up of a series of procedure calls. First, the main procedure calls calculate order total, which calls two more procedures inside orders.c. The result is then output with a final call to the print procedure. To compile and run our program, we need to use a terminal. We can open a terminal in Visual Studio Code by going to the terminal menu and selecting New Terminal. Once we have a terminal open, we need to navigate to the folder where our code is saved using the cd command. Once we're in the correct folder, we can use the gcc command to compile our code. The command will look something like this. This command tells the compiler to compile the main and orders files and output an executable file called program. Finally, to run our program, we use the following command. This will execute the program and we should see the output in the terminal. That's it. With these few commands, we can compile and run our C code. It's great to see you learning about procedural code with C. Let's wrap it up for now. We'll bring you more informative content in our next video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and share this video. Thank you for watching.